In most ancient traditions and societies, a lot of human culture was centered around the fact that dragons were the ones that governed the weather and the elements, and that they were forces that need to be worked with. And when I say work with, it's not like how we would work with today with most of our spirit guides. Honestly, it was more aligned with how we would perceive worship. And that's honestly the biggest thing that separates me from just about everyone you'll see online that interacts with dragons. And even then, almost everyone that does work with dragons, they have a plethora of other pantheons that they would like to interact with, or they put the dragons in alignment with the pantheon they associate themselves with. Even when I first started out as a Luciferian, I always worked with dragons as the center. And though my relationship may have changed through that journey, I always venerated them. I always saw them worthy as beings of worship. Now, culturally in China, they have the Dragon Kings, and more so along the line of my heritage and my ancestry, which is maybe why I feel this way. But the ancient Mayans and the ancient Aztec people, they had the Mayan they had the feathered serpent, and he was pretty much seen as the creator god, the one that brought learning and culture to these societies. And the thing is, yes, just about everyone that you know that works with dragons knows that the dragons are great creatures of transformation. And so it's easy to perceive that they are beings to work with. And I know a lot of people have shared their experience as to why they don't worship dragons. And it's not really something the dragons themselves really ask or require on the path of the dragon. But for me, when I made that personal decision to align myself with that idea, I grew up in a very Christian household, and when you are raised up in a church, there's almost like this unspoken peer pressure to say the prayer that almost every Christian knows. And it's asking Jesus to come into your heart and accepting him as your Lord and God, and being pretty much a sheep for Jesus. And I take these vows and I take these spiritual principles very seriously, and if you don't really disconnect from it entirely, it's going to be something that is attached to you. And so I openly spoke out the words that I defy you, Jesus. I don't want you in my life. I don't want you as a participant in my spiritual journey. And I said these things openly and defiantly in my own room, in private, of course. But I denounced the name of God. And I claimed the dragon. That I would pledge my soul, that I would pledge myself to understanding what the dragon has shown me and what the dragon has taught me. And the main reason, the biggest reason that this whole thing started for me is, if you've been on my channel, you know, but if you're new and you just happen to see this, the main reason was I had a spiritual awakening. In that awakening, I had a past life epiphany. Not my last life, but the life before that, I was a dragon. And then basically, long story short, I fell from grace, and I'm trying to work my way back up. And when I understood and I really aligned myself with that idea, even at the very beginning of my journey, within the very first 2 months, almost 2 months to the day if I remember correctly, but my dragon guardian revealed himself in full manifestation for me. And being given a grand sign that soon, that fast, and that rapidly, I knew what I needed to do on my end. I know a fair amount of people on the dragon's path, know that they have a connection with dragons on a soul level. Not everyone has that, so it's going to be a little bit different. But knowing who I know and knowing what I've had conversations with the other people, I know most of these people that you see online that talk about working with dragons identify with themselves as being a dragon. So for me, it wasn't really a far-fetched idea to say, hey, I'm one of them. I need to align myself with the culture that comes with it. But regardless of how you want to initiate the experience, whether you want to work with them or whether you want to worship them, you're going to start off as a dragon rider. Now, how that looks like for you will be completely independent on whether you want to do draconic pathworking or draconian pathworking, or do your own blend, or associate other beings and other deities with that work. But from my experience and from my whole journey, the most you're going to get out of working with dragons if you solely work with dragons. And I know it's going to be challenging for some of these people that watch these videos. There is a huge mental shift on how you interact with them. Like I said, I see myself as being one of their kind. So it's more of a familial thing for me. But I understand that dragons have their own structure and they have their own hierarchy, which a lot of people don't like to idealize or associate in any kind of practice, honestly. But that's the truth. Dragons are very structured, they're very hierarchical. There are elder dragons, there's young dragons, there's ancient dragons. The more age they have, the more authority they typically can impose. And I really don't work with the young dragons. For whatever reason, it's always the older ones and the ones of higher status that have always appeared before me. But even then, you do need to understand there are dragon gods, beings within dragon society that have reached that threshold, and where they have that given command, and they've earned that authority through their own passage of whatever struggles and whatever helped them create to become what they have become. And typically, when you look into what a dragon god is and see what a dragon god has behind it, it's a primordial being. It's not something that just exists like an earned status. I mean, it kind of is, but when you have looked at an actual dragon god, it's something that's older than most of the universe itself. Not every dragon god, but at least the ones of chaos specifically. Now, a lot of people do talk about the goddess Tiamat. She is a goddess of chaos. I have my dragon father. Other side of the coin as far as dragons are concerned. Now, the key difference between worshipping dragons and working with dragons is working with dragons has almost like an expected outcome. You are having a relationship with these beings mostly because you're trying to attain something or use them for something. And it's not always a personal gain. Maybe it's personal transformation, personal growth. But that is a one-sided relationship, I feel. And for me, when I say I worship, it definitely is an act of submission, but it's more of an act of recognition as one in the fact that I am part of their family. And I have associated myself with that since the very beginning. But as I know, I have fallen from grace, so I need to work my way back up to the top. Not the very top, but work my way back up to their kind and their status. And I do have that within my own right, but I want to know when I cross over, I am with them. And that is really my ultimate goal, is just to return to where I belong, karmically speaking and cosmically speaking. And I've gone through so much in my personal life. I'm not going to really share too much about that. But over the last 2.5 months, I started telling people. And I started really, really explicitly saying, I am done. I am done, and I really fucking mean it. I am done living up to human expectations. That is below me. I live up to my dragon father's expectations, and that is what means the most to me, and that is my true purpose. And the biggest thing is the first rule of the whole dragon's path. If I am to claim the dragon, I am not to shame the dragon. Meaning, if I am going to say anything in alignment with dragons, then I need to own up to it. And I need to show what a dragon really is, and what it means, and what it really means to represent their fire in this world. But that's the base, core fact for everyone that works with dragons. When you participate with their magic, when you participate with their knowledge and wisdom, you become a spark of their fire. But when you worship, it's like a direct link and a tether that makes you a little more connected than you would be if you just solely work with them. And that is an experience almost everyone is missing out on. But if you really want a good idea of what it looks like to worship dragons, check out the Draconic Theurgy video. That really gives you a good outlay and what the whole system of what dragon worship looks like, and why it's called Draconic Theurgy, and why I call it Draconic Theurgy, and basically my whole system of how I participate with these beings. And for me, dragons aren't quote-unquote gods. There are dragon quote-unquote gods, yes, that is true, but the plethora of all of draconic society and culture, these beings, at the most basic fact, they represent a primordial force, and they're not just masters of fire, they're heavily associated with the fire. One, there's the 9 elements, but we're just going to stick with the 4 primary elements, and then ether if you want to include that. But dragons are the masters of all of the elements. And even though there are the dragon lords of certain elements, every dragon has that connection. And what makes the dragons so unique is their mastery over life and over magic itself. And that's the whole reason why dragons are such great beings of transformation. The fact that they have that mastery of all the elements, and they know that they are the masters of that magic. So working with dragons, for me, is perceiving itself as, how can I participate with dragons, and how can I participate with the universe and create my own magic? When I worship dragons, and how I see it working itself out is, how can I position myself to be of assistance with this magic? How can I position myself to align myself with where I am needed in the universe most? It's a very popular phrase in the spiritual community, and it makes a lot of sense. Energy goes where attention or energy flows where attention goes. But that's not how it works, dragons. Dragons go where they are most needed, and the most easiest reminder of that is just the association that almost everyone at this point, if you're about my age or a little younger maybe, but if you remember the Never-Ending Story, if you remember Puff the Magic Dragon, if you remember, what's it called? Pizza Dragon. All those dragons, they go where they are needed the most, and it happens to be for the kids. But that's not entirely unaligned with what dragons do, or some dragons. But cosmically speaking, that's what the dragons are for. One, I mean, you see what I have said. They are the protectors of life, and they will do anything to protect the balance and harmony of everything in creation. So not just as protectors and guardians of the cosmic balance of everything, but also just, like I said, they go where they are needed most, and they participate on what they feel they are needed to do. And that's, if you know what dragons are, you know what that exactly means. So the primary focus for me is always just being a representation of that dragon's flame, and what that fire really represents in this world. That's the whole reason I call myself the voice of the dragons. One, because of what I've always felt I can and will become for dragonkind to this world, the ambassador between man and dragon. For me, the whole idea of worshiping dragons is a declaration of truth and the realization of not just what I am, but what they are. At the very, very, very beginning of my whole experience, or like pretty much leading up to it, I was going pretty much through an identity crisis and just unaware of who I truly was at my core. I mean, I was 19 at the time, and I just wanted to know. That was the whole thing. I wanted to know just what reality and what everything was and is. So I started kind of from an atheistic blank slate. I had my own ideas and perceptions, but I wanted to really give myself a good, firm understanding. So I called myself an atheist, and I perceived everything through that atheist lens, with that idea that I needed to really rationalize and put everything together logically. So as I'm going through researching different cultures and religions, and I did have some experience with that growing up and going to certain schools and being able to be exposed to certain academic courses that most kids never get to participate in. And looking at most of human history and just the different pantheons, almost every type of being that you come across, they just don't live up to what the whole God status is, and in my perception, honestly, even though I don't like it, I already said it. But if you were to choose what a God represents, Jesus, the man himself, he really lives up to it. There's very few beings that have that kind-heartedness and that tender amount of grace that when they walk by, just their presence draws everyone, and it has that healing compassion, that healing grace that you really should associate a God with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be healing, but the fact that most gods you come across have some type of wrath and fury and some type of jealous archetype behind them, that's just not what I want to be connected to, or what my soul wants to align itself with for forever at least. So being able to identify with the dragons, with that idea behind that, with that in mind behind that idea, sorry I glitched, it just felt very natural. It felt very fluid. I mean, I did have that, like I said, growing up in that upbringing, growing up in a Christian household. So everything just kind of fell into place for me personally. And historically speaking, this really isn't too taboo of an idea. And a lot of people may ask, why would you want to worship dragons? I want to ask them back, and I ask you, why are we so uncomfortable with that idea? So I'm going to go ahead and end things here. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to leave them down below. If you are happy to connect with me and just want to associate more, have any questions and want to connect on a more personal level, DMs are always open. Check me out on Instagram and TikTok. And if you happen to be on Facebook, just feel free to add me. It's Yuga Hytherion. With that being said, may you blessed be, Doreko Hic sunt, and have a good day.